Hola, esta conversación de Arriba Desnudo transcurre en Bilbao durante la celebración de la reunión de divulgación científica Naucas, donde en varias ocasiones yo mismo he estado dando algunas charlas. Gracias a Naucas y a su gente, gracias a la Cátedra de Cultura Científica de la Universidad del País Vasco, por supuesto gracias a quienes nos apoyan en GoFundMe y en Patreon, porque gracias a ustedes podemos tener estas conversaciones que de otro modo sería imposible tener sobre divulgación, pensamiento crítico y algo más. Hoy vamos a conversar con el que ha sido llamado el máximo experto en medicinas complementarias, el doctor Edzard Ernst, investigador médico, divulgador y un gran luchador en contra de las pseudomedicinas, lo que en ocasiones le ha costado más de un disgusto, y de eso vamos a hablar. Dr. Ernst, thank you for this conversation. I will introduce you briefly to our viewers and we'll begin. El doctor Ernst es médico, obtuvo formación en diversas pseudomedicinas como acupuntura, entrenamiento autogénico, herboristería, homeopatía, terapia de masajes y manipulación espinal. Ha sido profesor y director de departamento en universidades de Alemania, Austria y el Reino Unido. Es fundador de 2 revistas médicas y autor de 52 libros que están ahora finalmente empezando a llegar a España. Algunos de ellos, más de 1000 artículos en revistas médicas arbitradas por pares, y ha obtenido 16 premios científicos, entre otros el John Maddox para la defensa de la ciencia, que es un premio que se da a personas que sufren problemas por su defensa de la ciencia. Como investigador se ocupa de la evaluación crítica de la supuesta medicina alternativa, sin importar cuán poderosos sean sus promotores, lo que lo ha puesto en la mira de algunos importantes negociantes de la pseudomedicina, como Carlos de Inglaterra, Carlos de Gales, efectivamente. En la descripción de este vídeo encontrarán enlaces a todos los espacios del Dr. Ernst en Internet, su blog, Twitter, páginas y demás. Dr. Ernst, unlike software engineering or car design, medicine seems simple. Anyone can and does diagnose and propose treatments. This makes medicine a constant in people's lives. You tell anyone, no matter their trade or their profession, someone you meet on the street or in a bar, and you tell them about an ailment you have, and they'll be glad to diagnose and propose and prescribe a treatment immediately. Stop eating gluten. Oh, don't drink milk. You need a keto diet. Go to a pseudotherapist. This is part of the problem. Simplification of the problems of medicine. How much do you find this in your daily fight?
It's an interesting question. When I came to Exeter and decided to do some science in this field, I had a lot of people who were doing exactly what you described, who were telling me what to do and how to do it, and of course they knew it better, as all the scientists put together, and that tension existed all the time. That you because alternative medicine is alternative, and alternative means the man in the street has an opinion about it, and so I got criticized all the time for not doing the right thing, for not doing the right research, for using the wrong methodologies, etc., etc. So that tension exists very strongly.
But when they speak about the wrong methodology, this presupposes they have a methodology. But whenever you approach complementary medicines or pseudomedicines, they don't have a methodology. They have various methodologies or various ways of justifying what they are proposing. They don't have a method, do they?
No, there's no alternative science. There's only one science, but they tend to like the scientific methodology as long as it produces the results that they like.
Yes.
As soon as the result is not to their liking, then they say, well, you should have made it differently, and anyway, a clinical trial with just 100 people cannot have the same sort of weight as 2,000 years of experience and that sort of thing. So they change the goalpost, as we say, all the time, depending on what your results are.
And they do a lot of cherry picking. In the case of homeopathy, specifically, everyone will speak about Montaigne or about Benveniste, even though Randy destroyed Benveniste's results. But they'll ignore all the rest of the science, all the rest of the studies say, oh, but Montagnier, who happens to be a Nobel Prize winner, and they'll use Montagnier's results. But they also speak, and you just said, like it's thousands and thousands of years. Most of these therapies are quite young in reality. Homeopathy is 2,000 years old. 2,200, sorry.
200 years old, yeah.
And you speak in your book about this naturism, or naturalism, which I remember when I was a kid, my family was into that. And they treated themselves by wetting long cloths and enveloping themselves in wet clothes, which was horrible as a child. This was awful. But this was also very recent. What was the name of the person that started this nature?
In Germany, it's Kneipp, Preisnitz, Winter's Kneipp. This is a sort of hydrotherapy movement where you use cold water cures and that sort of nature cures. Nothing wrong with it, except the therapeutic claims are exaggerated. They don't usually do much harm, but they don't do a lot of good either.
Yes, and the problem is also that they move you away from treatments that might have more chance of helping, although they're not sure. That it's not for sure. And this is something they usually say, well, medicine is not 100% sure. You're not 100% sure you're cured. And the problem is that alternative medicine, or what is called alternative medicine, does promise magical wonders, 100% cures. Every alternative practitioner you talk with will say, well, I have a 95% chance of success rate, which is, no one has that. But they don't have to prove it.
Yeah, and they say they treat the root cause of the disease, whereas in conventional medicine we just treat the symptoms.
Yes.
They claim. They go much deeper, find the root cause, treat the root cause, and then your body helps itself to get healthy again. That's a beautiful claim, except it's not true.
There's no basis whatsoever.
No, because if you treat the root cause, you would expect that the disease is gone forever. If the root cause is treated, there's no more disease. So the claim actually, seen that way, would mean that we have complete cures offered in alternative medicine. That is demonstrably wrong, because even the few alternative treatments that do work in clinical tests also are symptomatic treatments. They're not, for instance, St. John's wort is effective for depression. St. John's wort is a herbal remedy, so you take that remedy and you're less depressed. That is scientifically proven, but it doesn't cure the depression. If you stop St. John's wort, the depression comes back. Yes. So it's not a curative treatment. And as far as I can see, after 25 years of researching this, there's not a single alternative cure for anything.
One thing about herbalism, which is I find especially interesting, when you say St. John's wort does this, or basil does this, or now medicinal marijuana, which is the big thing today, because my generation just wanted marijuana to have a good time, but now they find themselves validated. Oh, I'm not just getting high, I'm curing myself. But actually, this is not precise. It's not marijuana that's medicinal. We have to find which are the active components, because there are about, if I recall, 300 different substances that could be helpful in marijuana, and others that are wrong, that can even be harmful. So when you talk about one herb being good for us. What you're doing is not researching which of the many components of that plant in particular is helpful and which aren't.
That can be actually quite complex. The usual approach, as you say, would be you have a herb that is effective, and then you isolate the molecule that is the active molecule, and then you put it in a pill, and you have a pharmaceutical product.
Yes.
That sometimes can happen, and it has happened with aspirin. Aspirin is probably the most successful medication that we have worldwide in the history of medicine. I'm not sure that there's anything more successful than aspirin, and that was derived from willow bark. Somebody knew that willow bark is good for pain and lowers temperature, and then this man, a chemist, tried to isolate the compounds, managed to isolate the compound, change the molecule slightly to make it less aggressive
to the stomach, yes.
And now we have aspirin. So it sometimes works, but many other times it doesn't work. St. John's wort is quite a good example. We have whole families of compounds that work together, and you cannot isolate one molecule that is the antidepressant. If you do that, take just one molecule, it's not nearly as effective as the whole plant.
So you have to understand that the chemical interactions of several of the components, which makes it much harder.
Yeah, but it's pharmacology, but very complicated pharmacology.
Mm-hmm. I have a problem with pseudomedicine, and that is separating those who are sincere believers, those who are clearly madmen, and I would use as a case the creator of New Germanic medicine, Dr. Hammer, who was clearly out of his mind. All his actions were that of a classic schizophrenic who had these beliefs and this paranoia that he was being called and that he had the answers to everything. In fact, even though he did a lot of harm, it is a sad figure. I find Dr. Ricky Hammer a sad figure. But then there are those who are conscious swindlers and scammers. They know they lie. And I think these are the worst. Do you also find these three kinds of people in you?
Yeah, I have met a lot of alternative therapists. To me, if I look back the last 25 years, I have met mostly people who are totally convinced that they are doing the right thing. So I have met the diluted type, but there are swindlers as well. Mostly the swindlers, in my view, are the ones that make a lot of money out of it and selling products. On the internet, you see 50 million websites on alternative medicine, and there you find all the swindlers in the trade. The individual therapists that I have met, I hesitate to call swindlers because they are convinced that they're doing the right thing.
They're honest.
Yes, and the interesting question is, which one is more dangerous? And I think the honest, diluted people are more dangerous. They are socially much more acceptable, they're nice guys, etc., etc., but they are more convincing. And because they are more convincing, they have people that follow them. Homeopaths who treat cancer patients and treat them to death. and that makes them really, really dangerous. Whereas the swindler can be easily recognized with a little bit of critical thinking. You say, okay, he wants my money, now he wants more money, he wants even more money. Or, eventually you get it that this is a swindler. The diluted people often work for nothing or for a salary in a hospital or whatever.
This brings a problem here. Being honest makes it more difficult to reach them. So for the swindler, you can use the law. I don't know how the law is in Great Britain today, but here in Spain, for instance, it's very difficult to prosecute a swindler. We are having one case now. A man that told a young kid with leukemia that he was going to cure him, but he had to leave the conventional therapy. And a few months later, the kid died. The father is working very hard to bring this man to justice. But the position of the judges is that this young man is 21, he's an adult. He decided freely to forgo the conventional therapy and accept whatever this man told him. So there is no crime. He was lying, he was using deceit, he knew he was not curing. He had never cured anyone of cancer, much less leukemia. And leukemia is one of the cancers we are now acting upon with great success. 50 years ago, most people with leukemia died. But it's very hard to prosecute them. How is this in Great Britain or in Germany today?
Very similar. It is because you have to prove that the crime has been committed, and that proof can be very, very difficult. I have been in court as an expert witness several times, and it really is very difficult. I remember one successful conviction where somebody just sexually assaulted his patients, and then a crime has been committed, and if you have 5 women in this particular case saying the same thing, then okay, the judge can convict him. But otherwise, the burden of proof rests on the person who is taking the swindler to court, the quack to court, and the proof is sometimes, or most of the time, very, very difficult.
But the other way around is quite different. When one of your friends and co-writers, co-authors, Simon Singh, was prosecuted for lying about chiropractics, he said that they were happily
promoting bogus treatment.
Happily promoting bogus treatments. He was brought to court right away, and it was a protracted affair. How was that? Because you were involved in that.
This was during the promotion of our book, Trick or Treatment, and we had divided our tasks, what each of us does. We had written the book together, so the tasks were 50-50, and he was writing something for the Guardian newspaper, and there was this famous sentence. He sent me the article before it was published, and I said, yeah, that's fine, factually correct, nothing wrong. And it was published, and he was sued for libel, not for cheating, but for libel. This went to court, and it was legally very complicated. The first disappointment was that the publisher didn't defend us. The second disappointment was that the Guardian didn't defend us. So Simon was on his own, and the legal costs were enormous. So the first ruling went against him. That was a ruling whether that was a comment or a factual statement that went against him, and then the British Chiropractic Association so they were winning the case, and then the second ruling, Simon won, and they had to pack in. They gave up the case, so it never formally went to court, but they gave up and had to pay all the legal costs. But Simon was still out of pocket by quite a substantial amount of money, and it cost him 2 years of his life. He did nothing else but that case. I was still in post in Exeter. We, a whole team of 20 people, only did chiropractic research to back up the claim that they were heavily promoting bogus treatments.
But you did change the law, which is what I want to get at.
Yeah, that's
finally the libel laws in the UK were changed.
Yeah, that is thanks to Simon. He, a normal person, probably wouldn't even have gone as far with the legal case. A normal person would have given up because it was so expensive, etc., etc. So Simon never gave up that case.
Right.
Once he had won that case, he said, "Okay, now I'm going to change the law," and everybody was laughing. I have lots of legal friends who said, "Your friend Simon Singer has gone mad.
Yes.
It is impossible to change libel law," but he managed to change libel law. So previously, you had to show. When you were accused of something, you had to show that you're innocent.
You have to prove you're innocent.
Yeah, and now it is the reverse. The person who accuses you has to show that you're guilty.
This is important because we are trying to change laws today in Spain regarding several of those things, matters of opinion and matters relating to fraud and medical fraud.
But it was a very, very difficult time. Nobody wanted to publish critical stuff about alternative medicine. All my articles, when I sent it to a medical journal, they saw where it came from, they read the article, and they said, we cannot publish that, we are afraid. Sometimes they sent it to lawyers, and the lawyers said you have to change that sentence, and then they published it. So it was difficult for everybody, and only the lawyers were happy.
Yes, that's the worst thing. It's them that are usually happy. A few years back, I was researching the kind of training that medical professionals receive in my two countries. I'm Mexican originally. I have been in Spain for 20 years. I'm a man of many countries, as you are. Mm. But I did research the medical training in Mexico and in Spain. And I've always said that doctors are not always scientists. They're highly trained technicians of the human body, maybe the engineers of the human body. But I found out very worryingly that the scientific method was not among the basic studies they had. It's an option. Mm-hmm. You can take that course as an option, scientific method. But if not, you can have a full medical training without having a relation with what the scientific methods are. Experimentation, observation, quantification, etc. How much a problem is this in medicine?
It's a big problem. Not just the scientific method is not being systematically taught. At least when I was in medical school 40 years ago, it wasn't. But until recently, I was teaching medical students, and we didn't teach them the scientific method either. But what I find even worse, and this is related, critical thinking isn't being taught. So what you're taught are millions and millions of facts, and there are so many facts that you have no time to think. Yeah. So if you want to succeed in medical school, you have to be very good in memorizing stuff. And you don't even have time to do anything else. You don't think about what you are learning, you just learn. And eventually you become a doctor, and you're confronted with your first patients, and I think this is dramatic for every junior doctor. And you try to do your best, but medical knowledge changes so quickly, and in order to cope with that change, you would need the skills of critical thinking, including obviously knowing about the scientific method, etc., etc. So when, for instance, a very simple example, a new drug comes out, it's heavily promoted as a huge advantage over previous treatments, and most doctors don't even read the original papers, but maybe you're especially conscientious, and you read the original papers, but you have no thinking tools of analyzing these papers and saying, okay, that was a bit funny, that is a bit biased, or this is perhaps not quite so rosy as presented by the rep who's selling the drug, etc., etc. So what I'm trying to say is the critical thinking tools for your professional life as a doctor would be much more important than the actual knowledge when you graduate, and you don't have it. Luckily, some doctors get it, but through their own initiative, through their own volition, and through their own whatever they do. They join groups or whatever and discuss things more critically. And some medical journals are very good in promoting critical thinking. The British Medical Journal is excellent. This is our journal. Every British doctor gets the British Medical Journal every week, and they systematically try to teach you critical thinking.
Because this is what happened to you. You studied all these facts, anatomy. I remember my friends when they studied medicine and they were studying anatomy, and it was really hell to learn each and every small part. But you turned from a medical doctor into a scientist, because research was what finally caught your attention, your interest.
Yeah. My personal story is that when I graduated, there were too many doctors and too few places, hospital places. So I ended up in a homeopathic hospital, the only homeopathic hospital in Germany at the time. And I learned homeopathy, and I was fascinated. Looking back, I would have been fascinated if I had done psychiatry or gynecology or whatever. One is fascinated with one's first patients, with one's first real contact, real life doctoring, and so forth. But homeopathy was particularly fascinating because the pharmacologist who only a couple of years earlier told me that this stuff cannot possibly work. And there I was seeing patients getting better with homeopathic treatments.
Yes.
So for me this was a big question mark. And when I left this hospital, I did all sorts of other things, and then I became a scientist. Spent about 10 years in a much more basic science, and there I had to systematically learn what scientists do and how to be critical and how to find biases in papers and that sort of thing. So then I returned into clinical medicine again, and in the back of my mind was still that homeopathic bit, and whenever I was in a position to run clinical trials, I did some clinical trials in acupuncture or homeopathy simply because it was my hobby. by that time I was boss of a very big department in Vienna, and somehow I didn't quite like it. It was basically administration of 120 people who were working for me,
yes.
and everything I liked in medicine, either the clinical contact or the research, was out of the window. I was just becoming an administrator, and
yes,
I really hated it. So I saw in the New Scientist advertised the first post worldwide in complementary medicine, and I applied, and I got it simply because I had done as a hobby a few studies, and that was more and probably better than all the other candidates. So I got that post, and then even though I was mildly in favor of homeopathy, acupuncture, etc., then I had to leave all my baggage behind and just do as good science as I possibly could, and that's what I did. If my results would have been positive, I would have been the hero of the world of
complementary medicine, yes.
And I would have gone. I would have probably got a Nobel Prize for proving that the laws of physics are wrong and homeopathy is correct. But predictably, the results were negative, and I became the enemy of the world of alternative medicine.
This is something important. People don't realize that in order to call something fake medicine or pseudo-medicine or pseudotherapies, you have to find out. When you started, it wasn't very clear, at least in the case of homeopathy, yes, Hahnemann was criticized very early because of the chemical aspect. If you dilute something up to the point that there's not a molecule there, it cannot have an effect, period. But other complementary medicines, you had to find out, they were plausible, they were possible. Maybe there was something there. People didn't know, and you had to go and do the research before people like me. I'm only a journalist, I'm not a medical doctor. My work is informing people about this. But in order for me to say this is pseudo-medicine, I need people like you and the papers and the journals to say, now we know this. But many years ago when you started, this wasn't so clear.
No, it wasn't very clear. And even with homeopathy, okay, the plausibility wasn't there, but in my experience it did work. So I thought maybe homeopaths are right, and this process, which they call potentiation, where they shake a thing, actually does transmit some information into the diluted. And maybe their fantasies are not fantasies, but
there's a hidden mechanism there somewhere.
There's something really basic to discover. That's why I say I would have received the Nobel Prize, because it would have required practically a new law of nature.
Yes. One question, you stress that certain, and first, before I have questions that I have to turn around. You are on the left of the political spectrum. Your work researching that system, your position about Brexit, which I usually retweet. Tell us, and you haven't said this as far as I know, you are a man that's on the left of the political spectrum. And we have a problem in the left of the political spectrum, in this belief in pseudomedicine and pseudoscience in general is very much a part of being on the left, being against the system. I've written a whole book about this, about this problem in the left. Have you seen this also in the left wing in other European countries? And how do you confront the fact that people who are politically close to you, that believe in certain basic ideas, are also opposing science and opposing reason and sometimes even opposing progress in the name of being against the system or against the establishment?
It's interesting because lots of people say that the alternative movement is a movement from the left, and maybe originally when it came with the flower power and that sort of thing in the 60s, 70s, when we too were young, maybe then it was the new age and slightly left. But now I've seen people who are extremely against alternative medicine, who are left and right, and I've seen people who are extremely convinced of alternative medicines, who are also left and right. And I don't see that division in politics. Mm-hmm. Neither am I that sure as you are that I'm on the left. I'm just an old guy with opinion, and I know that Brexit is a stupidity. That's why I'm against it. I would be against it if I was a semi-fascist or a semi-Trotskyist.
Yes, but you also did a lot of excellent research about medicine in the Nazi era.
Yes.
And this also gives me the idea that you're at least a little bit to the left of the political spectrum. You stress that certain medicines are attractive because of the human touch, the closeness of the practitioner and the patient. And even if that closeness is fake in the case of scammers, in the case of people who don't believe but are taking money away from people, but they fake closeness and they fake empathy and they fake caring a lot about you and your family in order to take your money. And people appreciate the warmth, the caring, the attention. And in a sense, socialized medicine precludes that. There's not always enough money, enough budget for doctors to be 20, 30, 40 minutes with each patient and care about them like the alternative practitioner does. I'm thinking about the NHS in Great Britain and the Spanish socialized medicine system, which was basically molded upon the NHS and the Naive dream. In fact, the man who created the social medicine in Spain was very much inspired by Naive and his idea that health is a right. But this coldness, this thing that we don't have enough money to care so much for so many people with public money, does this push people into alternative medicine, which is always private medicine, especially now?
Yeah, definitely you're right. That is a very important point. The popularity of alternative medicine is at the same time a criticism of what is happening in conventional medicine. One cannot stress that often enough. I say it with almost every lecture I give, because it's important. If we do not want people go to charlatans, then we better get our act together in mainstream medicine and learn from these charlatans what they do in order to establish a good therapeutic relationship. And okay, we don't have the money to make every visit to a GP last for 1 hour, but you can have a good relationship in shorter time as well. And we ought to learn from them. Not the quackery, but the empathy bit, the compassion bit. And we are in danger of delegating this to charlatans, and that would be disastrous for medicine.
And it is becoming a disaster because people are dying, at least in Spain, people are dying. But for this you need to educate one of the hardest people to educate in the world, which is the ruling class and the politicians. That this is important, that it's not we take care of the population through socialized medicine, but that we take good care of them completely. Is it possible to educate politicians and the ruling class?
I'm speaking now for the present situation in Britain, and our politicians are beyond education. they're so disastrous, the present lot, it is unspeakable. How they mislead the people, particularly about Brexit, and it's difficult to decide whether the Tories are worse than Labour or Labour is worse than the Tories. It's a complete disaster. The trouble when we talk about healthcare and politicians, the trouble is that healthcare is something that has to be thinking in terms of decades, 2 or 3 decades, and politicians think of election period.
The next election, yes.
And they will always say what is the most popular thing to say, what gets the best votes. And if homeopathy is popular, then they will they won't oppose homeopathy. Having said that, in Britain we've just thrown homeopathy out of the window.
Yes, I think that's in part your fault. But yes, we've had 3 things lately. In Spain, the new government is, at least in part, worried about certain medicines and worried about homeopathy in particular. We did know that the NHS, after this first committee that gave its results a few years back about the uselessness of homeopathy, and we learned that a few weeks or months back, the NHS decided to stop funding homeopathy. And just a couple of weeks back, the High Court confirmed throwing out homeopathy from the NHS. The University of Lille in France decided to stop their homeopathy degree for this year because there seems to be something fishy in homeopathy. And the French government has called for an investigation, which has people like the Waron laboratories very, very worried. Is this a personal success for you? Do you think this can go over, or can just be turned back very easily? Because it is a good thing what's happening. And will it sometime happen in Germany, where homeopathy was born?
Yeah. Well, lots of positive things have happened. It's very kind of you to say that this is due to my activities. But it's actually due to a lot of work from many, many other people. Perhaps I started a little snowflake rolling down the hill and it became an avalanche.
Of course, it's Simon Singh, of course, and it's
Good Thinking Society, which is Simon's brainchild.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, a lot of hard work from many clever people did that. And now France is coming online, and Germany is strongly now opposing to homeopathy in particular. I'm involved in 3 German groups pursuing these goals, and when it comes to these things, I'm actually an optimist. I think there will be disappointments on the way, and it's a long battle, but it's a battle that cannot possibly be lost because we have the evidence on our side, and maybe not in all walks of life, maybe not in all walks of politics, evidence counts as much as it should count, but surely in healthcare, evidence will have to win the day.
I enjoy your optimism very much. It's very welcome. We're having problems here with the vaccine, the anti-vaccine movement, which is very worrying.
That is also overlapping a great deal with the alternative medicine movement, because the alternative practitioners are the ones that are fueling the anti-vaccine movement. To a large degree.
I wanted to mention, I don't know if you have any knowledge about an Austrian priest who was Ivan Illich. Have you ever heard about him?
Yeah.
he started the anti-medicine movement, and he started it in Mexico. And
he wrote very influential books.
Yes.
About the curse of modern medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very influential. And it started a sort of rethinking and a self-critical process within medicine, which was much needed, because let's face it, most doctors are really quite self-satisfied. Their biggest worry is how to finance the third Porsche in the garage, and their self-criticism doesn't come high on their agenda, to put it mildly.
Yeah.
And I think anybody who starts a movement that leads to critical thinking within medicine, thinking by medicines, by doctors about what they are doing, is more than welcome.
At the same time, he had a terrible influence in the opportunities of having good medical care in Mexican indigenous communities. And right here in the Basque country, there's a big movement around Ivan and about we have the right to choose our treatment, which sounds very, very reasonable. You have the right to choose your treatment if you have the necessary information about the treatments you are choosing. It's not just what I like, this sounds better than that. So under the guise of giving you the right to choose your medicine, how you heal yourself, it's promoting more disinformation in society. And this is I didn't think that Ivan Illich was so influential within medicine, which is a good influence besides the bad influence he had.
The patient's right to choose is a very interesting subject, because as you say, particularly in alternative medicine, it is promoted as a certain patient wants acupuncture and because he cannot afford it, and some people can afford it. There's inequality, and therefore everybody should have, in an equal society, everybody should have the right to choose acupuncture. This is nonsense, and it's a misunderstanding, in my view, of what patient choice actually means. Patient choice cannot possibly override evidence. Patient choice is only, you can refuse treatment always, whether that is reasonable or not, that is very clear. But the patient cannot say, I have a common cold and therefore I want a bone marrow transplant. So choice has to be guided by evidence, otherwise it's not choice, it's just randomness, and randomness cannot be allowed.
And in the end, people kill themselves, be it Bob Marley or Steve Jobs. Okay, so skeptics and critics know well that we face powerful and sometimes ruthless enemies. I once was accused by Mexican Scientologists of being a criminal. Directly. I was also threatened once by a man who audio tapes the dead. He turns on a tape recorder, the tape recorder goes on, then he listens to it, and he believes that he hears things, messages from the dead. And he threatened me when I just came to Spain. It was very scary. And one time, some practitioner of tachyonic medicine, have you ever heard of this? It's thousands of pseudotherapies. These were scammers. And I exposed him here in Spain, and all of a sudden he called me, because my telephone was out there somehow. And he called me and he said he was a very good friend of the previous king. Mm-hmm. And he was going to sue me for 20 million euro. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I'd rather be sued for 200 million euros. Since they don't have even 1,000 euros, I don't really care. But this is funny, because these are people that might be a little bit dangerous, but they're not really powerful. But sometimes you find yourself in front of very powerful people, and that's your case. In your case, you have a problem with someone who's very powerful in Britain, who's very rich, and he believes he's from a high cradle, and who for many decades has been set up to become the King of England. And we're talking about, of course, about Charles, Prince of Wales. You started by denouncing his very successful pseudo-medical company, Duchy Originals. Duchy. Sorry, sometimes my French overwrites my English. And the huge and wealthy chain of pharmacies, Boots. Anyone who has ever been in Britain has bought something at Boots because it's the largest chain of pharmacies for selling his remedies. And they didn't take it in a sportsmanly way at all. In fact, like the Queen of Hearts in Alice in Wonderland, he basically yelled off with his head, which is one of the chapters in your book. This was in 2006, and it's been 12 years of a grand battle between Dr. Ernst and His Royal Majesty, the future, hopefully not, King of England.
Well, he's going to be King of England unless he dies before the Queen dies.
Long live Elizabeth II.
Yes, that was a long and protracted conflict. He started in the same year as I started my post in Exeter. He started a foundation called the Foundation for Integrated Health, which later had to be dissolved because there was irregularities, money laundering even going on in that. But anyway, that foundation was very influential in my field, and there was tension always, because to put it in a nutshell, I wanted to investigate alternative medicine, and he and that foundation and everybody associated with it wanted just to force feed the NHS on alternative medicine. So integrate today and investigate later. And I was saying investigate today and perhaps integrate some of it later. So that was the conflict. So I criticized things they were doing, patient brochures which were incorrect and misleading, etc., etc. Tension mounted. And one day the Prince decided that it would be a good idea to have an economist write a report on the economical impact of using more alternative medicine in the NHS. And they recruited me amongst other people for that report. I saw where it was going and said, okay, please take my name off it because that is terrible, full of mistakes. And I suggested first to correct the mistakes, and they said, no, you don't make mistakes. And then I said, take my name off. But I knew that this report, of which I had seen a draft, would go straight into the hands of politicians. It wasn't going to be published and peer-reviewed and that sort of thing, but straight into the hands of politicians. And I had sleepless nights because there was so much nonsense, dangerous nonsense in that report. And maybe some politician was stupid enough to actually implement this nonsense.
Yeah.
So I didn't know what to do. And then the Times phoned me and said, what about this report? And I said, yeah, what about it? Yeah, your name isn't on it, they said, and you're the only professor, how come? And I said, I withdrew from it because it's nonsense. Tell us more. And I said, I can't tell you more because there's confidentiality involved and so forth.
Mm-hmm. It was a confidential report, yeah.
Yeah, but I can tell you about the methodology because that didn't seem confidential to me. I can tell you why I pulled out, and I did, and in very dramatic words, because I was very angry. And the next day it was title page of the Times, and I received an email from this economist, just 2 lines. I will make sure that you regret that.
Oh my God.
So very nice threat.
Yes.
And sure enough, official complaint from the first private secretary of Prince Charles to my vice chancellor that I had broken confidentiality and I should be investigated. My vice chancellor, the idiot, had nothing better to do than to investigate, rather than call me and say, what is all this about? No, 13 months of investigation against my own university, from my own university. The institution that should protect me was pursuing me. At the end was the threat that I would be dismissed, and for me personally, this wouldn't have been such a disaster, but for the field it would have been a disaster, because they would have celebrated and said, oh, finally we have the victory over science, yes. Basically. So it was an important battle. I had to take lawyers, etc., against my own university, for my own money. And eventually I won this battle, and I received a letter that I had done nothing wrong. But in these 13 months, all support had broken down. My staff was being dismissed, and eventually I was had run out of money and had to go into early retirement. So I had won the battle and lost the war.
Yeah. Yeah. So in a way, he did. This was the cause you left your post in Exeter.
Yeah.
One more thing about the royal family before we leave this. The Queen still does have her homeopath with her, is right?
Yeah, he died 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago.
But there is this closeness between the royal house and homeopathy, which is, in a way, an example for the rest of Britain. The doctors, and how do they decide when the Queen is ill? When the Queen is ill, who treats her, the doctor or the homeopath? Do they joust and the winner gets to prescribe? How do they manage to mix real medicine with the Queen's homeopath?
I don't know. I don't know the mechanics of the royal house, but I imagine if the Queen is healthy, as long as she's healthy, she takes homeopathic pills, and as soon as she's ill, she gets the best what medicine has to offer. Certainly, whenever they need hospital treatment, they don't go into the homeopathic hospital, but they have the best consultants, the best professors in conventional medicine looking after them.
Which is why she's so fine at the age she is in.
Well, she must also have pretty good genes and a good constitution, and yes. Probably quite healthy lifestyle.
When we talk homeopathy or other kinds of pseudo medicines that are well known, chiropractic is not that well known in Spain, for instance, but it does have some practitioners. Acupuncture, which after Nixon became the rage in all the world. We leave out hundreds, probably even thousands of lesser known forms of pseudo medicine that are still out there that no one is even trying to research as you did, because you were going for the big ones, for the big pseudotherapies that were very well known. But these forms are still out there in YouTube, in chain emails, in word of mouth, and they change day by day, from ketonic diets, which is all the rage now, to the amazing Gwyneth Paltrow vaginal egg. This is one of the most amazing things. All the goop world that she has created is absolutely amazing. And organics, or the latest fad, which is taking forest baths. Have you heard about this? It's called Shirin-yoku in Japanese.
Yeah.
Will this ever end? We have new pseudotherapists almost every day.
Yes, it will not end. It seems to me that humans need something other than rationality in their lives. And having rational medicine, good evidence is very good. But then, because we are getting bored with it, or because we have too much money in our pocket, or because we have the need for something mystical, we always, as humans, seem to be looking for something else and falling for the most ridiculous claims. So it will continue, and it will never die. It has accompanied humans throughout history, and it will continue throughout history.
But still we fight it. You are in the inside of the fight as a researcher, as a doctor. You've had clinical experience. People like me are outsiders. We are the messengers, not the creators of the message. What can you tell, especially young people? I'm not young people, as you noticed, I'm not a young man anymore. Thanks to medicine, anyway, our grandparents were very much older than we are when they were our ages. I remember my grandmother at 60, she was a very old lady. Now I see Paul McCartney running around with a band, and he's 75, 74, something like that. But what can you tell to young people that want to fight for reason and fight for the scientific outlook of the world in medicine? How can they help, even if they're not doctors, even if they're just journalists, how can they help in this battle, even if it's not going to end ever?
It's very difficult to say this generally. Everybody, I think, has a responsibility to be honest and critical in all works of life. If you go to a restaurant and the waiter cheats you by not giving you back enough money, you ought to check your bill and be critical about it. If somebody says, I can cure your wife's cancer by doing some voodoo, you have to be critical. To me, it's a question about honesty and integrity. So be honest and try to be as integer as possible.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for this conversation. It's been a real pleasure after all these years following you and reading you to finally have you here.
Thank you.
Gracias al doctor Ernst, gracias a Naucas, gracias a la Cátedra de Cultura Científica de la Universidad del País Vasco y a todos los que nos apoyan en GoFundMe y en Patreon. Apóyennos, suscríbanse al canal, porque la lucha por el conocimiento, la inteligencia y la razón es cosa no de unos pocos, sino es labor de todos. Y porque lo que hay que promover, como dice el doctor también, es la honestidad y la integridad, porque mejora la vida de todos. ¿No usted?